So I've just recently maxed the Necromancer and I want to give my first impressions. Let's keep this short and simple at the beginning and I'll go more in depth. This is the strongest class in the Diablo 4 beta as of right now in terms of leveling. Not big of a surprise, honestly. I mean, you see Necro, you see the ability to summon literally mass armies, as you can see here. Typically, I guess you say summoning classes are going to be extremely strong early game. And then of course, potentially the summoning aspects fall off later. That is a very typical thing to have happened in MMOs, ARPGs, things like that. So this is really not a shocker to most people, but I want to go a little bit more in depth and talk about it here. So first off, guys, the early leveling process. Now, I want to walk you through a little bit of what kind of build I've been running. I've tested everything here. There really has been one build, in my opinion, that has outshined all the other ones. Before I go into the abilities, first thing I want to note is that you get a base ability here on the Necromancer, Raised Skeleton. This Raised Skeleton will summon either a warrior, a mage, or potentially a golem, but you're going to have to complete the quest at level 25 to unlock this, which I have not quite done yet. But these are just absolute damage sponges. If I were to walk into a group here, just show you all, both the mages and the warriors or reapers or whatever you're running, which I'm running reapers right now, they are just absolute damage sponges and will tank everything for you. I'm just gonna let them fight and I'll just show you all. Look at their HP bars. You might think, oh, well, they're kind of tanking a little bit of damage. Keep in mind that I'm literally not doing anything and I could just resummon them as they're generating me corpses. I don't have to do anything else. And they just tank everything for me, right? They just are a massive wall. And this is level 25, by the way, with not even an optimized character, right? I'm not full legendary. I am missing a couple legendary slots because I did favor some of the rare items. I'm not particularly overpowered in terms of attack power or armor or life or anything like that. I don't even have a summon focus build. Keep in mind, you can improve these guys even further. So this is just a massive bonus for you in the early game. But the Book of the Dead specifically is actually a really cool feature. Because what you could do is you could actually choose what kind of specific skeletons that you want to run. And if you don't want to run any summons at all, you could choose that as well. No matter what build you go with, you're guaranteed to get warriors, mages, and golems, and a certain amount of them. I believe the base amount is 4 for the skeletal warriors, and the base amount for mages is 3, which I have some modifications here to add additional ones. And no matter what, you could always summon them with this Raised Skeleton ability. Now, whether or not you want the base warriors or potentially like increased defensive options, or in my case, things that are going to spawn you corpses, is up to you. Same with the magic ones. You can run bone ones, you can run cold ones, shadow type, which is actually a really cool feature because you're guaranteed to get these. Now, what's also really cool about this is you can actually choose to sacrifice them so that you can actually go ahead and gain specific bonuses. For example, I can get 10% extra shadow damage if I were to go for this bonuses, or I could go for extra essence if I don't want the mages, which means I could run an ability or a necro, which is mainly focused on hemomancy or bone magic, and then just go all in on that and amp up my soul character without having all these summons. However, for the beta, I highly suggest you run the summons because they are very, very good at soaking damage for you. Now let's talk about the abilities a little bit here. And again, diving into kind of what the leveling experience was like. Again, I've tried all of them. I'm going to divide these up into, we have the darkness skills, the blood skills, and the bone skills. So in terms of the basic core skills, I believe that all the skills besides the bone skills are just much worse. Now, that's not including legendary items, of course, but when you're leveling, Bone Spear is absolutely a destruction, just insane. What's cool about it is if I cast it here, you'll see it shoots out the Bone Spear, which pierces, but then it actually comes back and shoots splinters back, which means if you're, on top of someone and you're just smacking them, you're going to hit them with both sides, which is massive, massive damage. Not only that, but there's also some really, really impressive options. For example, I can run Supernatural Bone Spear to give vulnerable on the first enemy hit. So that means I can constantly have vulnerable up. Now, if you compare the damage, again, look at the damage here. on the base version here, and if I were to like, let's say I were to remove some points here. So I'm going to remove some points. So we're down to 4 points here. And you could see the base version is 235 to 287 damage. If I were to compare that to Blood Lance, it is almost double. If I were to compare that to Blood Surge, again, it is almost, well, it's far more. But this one's a little bit different because it has some scaling. Blight, this one has less than half, although it does have some damage over time, which is hard to do against regular monsters. And then the Sever here is also actually quite solid, but you have to have the front attack and back attack to get the same amount of damage as Bone Spear. But also it it doesn't go as far because it doesn't, you know, do that same thing that Bone Spear does. So I found that Bone Spear is just so much better than any of the other abilities. There are some other options you can, like Blood Surge can be decent, Blight can be decent for like some summon based builds, but honestly I think Bone Spear is quite a bit better than these other options. On top of that, we have Corpse Explosion. So what's an interesting combo here in terms of the build that I'm running is that we have Bone Spear, which costs essence, and so you might be like, oh well, it costs essence, like eventually you're gonna run out, right? Wrong. Corpse Explosion is an AoE damage that does also a lot of damage, but if we upgrade it with some bonuses down here, we can actually generate essence. So the basic kind of, I guess you could say, gameplay pattern of this class is I'm going to run in, let my summons go ahead and attack, which, by the way, if you get the Reapers on these warriors, they can actually spawn you corpses. So you'll see here they're spawning me corpses, and let's say I just spammed out a bunch of Bone Spears. Well, now I can just detonate corpses for the rest of the duration and regenerate my corpses or my essence, and now boom, I can just spam out Bone Spears. Both the Corpse Explosion you can see here deals a lot of damage, and the Bone Spear, they do comparable damage. And then also the Bone Spear, or the Corpse Explosion rather, is going to give us 12% increased damage. So rotating in and out of this is basically going to allow our Bone Spears to do 12% more damage and our Corpse Explosion to do 12% more damage, which is insane. So a very, very synergistic build, and something that doesn't even require the ultimate. In fact, I'm not even running the ultimate because I don't even find it that good, and I don't even care about Corpse Tendrils. I could literally ignore all these skills down here and literally run the basic, core, and the corpse skills and be totally fine, and those are the ones that you unlock early. So the early game experience is very different than any other class. It is far better. It is so good. And what's crazy about it is it doesn't even get that much different later on in the skill tree, because you're going to be running the same skills anyways if you run something like this, which is very, very good. Something I've had no issues with clearing the majority of the content in the game. Again, we're talking about like mass damage. I can literally just spam out Corpse Explosion with massive AoE, right? And just insane amounts of damage. If I were to go and show you guys, I don't even have legendary items that improve this, which I can find, right? Unstoppable, I don't have Unstoppable in my kit. I have extra skeletal mages, which doesn't even improve Bone Spear, right? I have blood orbs, which doesn't affect. I have extra primary resource for every 20% of my life that I heal, which I'm not even healing except for potions. This one does increase the vulnerability after I hit someone, so after I pierce through people, but guess what? I'm already one-shotting them, so it doesn't even matter. And then we have Damaging Elite gives me barrier. We have extra skeletal warrior. So again, we have focusing on summoning in terms of our legendary items, so we can improve Bone Spear so much, and it's just so good. And so in terms of ease of class, in terms of like, am I gonna die? Never. If you're running the areas, I'm literally just talking, my summons are just gonna kill the guys for me, which is great, and I'm barely gonna get touched, if at all, here. And so this whole aspect of just absolutely annihilating everything. By the way, my mages are dying here because I have them bone mages, which actually consume their own HP to do damage. So if I didn't have that, they wouldn't be dying nearly as fast. But again, the mages just create an army for you, or the skeletons create an army for you, basically never get hit. And the damage on both those and your main abilities is really, really high. So the ease is just so much there. You can run a couple different builds and you'll be totally fine, because every single build has the summoning mechanics in it, unless you specifically take them away in your points, okay? So that's pretty much the first impressions on the leveling process. In terms of just, you know, going through the game, the Necro has been super easy. However, I will note that it's been super enjoyable. And this is the kind of the second part that I want to address here in terms of first impressions on the Necromancer. It has been super fun to start the game with a bunch of abilities and then guarantee get yourself an army no matter what build you're running. And then be able to experiment with also having your army always active. This skill you get at level 1, which is really, really fun. It makes it so that the Necromancer is fun all throughout the game, and it's kind of fun to run around with your army of skeletons. But that's not the only thing fun about it. You can actually use these guys and amplify your base abilities, which I've said earlier, and you actually will get massively rewarded for it because your abilities hit freaking hard, right? If your abilities didn't hit hard, then sacrificing your army would be like really stupid. But it doesn't feel stupid because you actually do one-shot almost everything here with your abilities. You can crit some massive numbers, which is pretty crazy. So overall, guys, I mean, the Necromancer so far has been my most enjoyable class. Rogue was previously my most enjoyable class because of how enjoyable the mobility is. That is one thing that a Necromancer is lacking, is the lack of mobility, but you really don't need it to be very, very efficient in the game because you do so much damage and you never ever die. So honestly, guys, if you're looking for an easy class, a layup here for the beta, and you just want to mess around, Necromancer is going to be that one. If you want to just experience the game mechanics. I want to talk a little bit more about class balancing. I don't actually think that the class balancing matters a whole lot in terms of what people think about, which is like, oh, this class is so overpowered and all the other classes are bad or whatever. I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So I think class balance discussion, and especially when referring to like the later game stages, I think that we can't really say. One thing's for certain though, I think that the Necro, when I'm leveling, it feels easy, even on a hard difficulty. And I feel like that's actually a good thing to see for all classes. So I would like to see all classes feel that way in terms of the power level, which I don't think all classes do. And I think mainly because I'm looking at this from a casual player's perspective, and I'd love to see the casual player feel like the leveling process is relatively easy. Because again, we're not talking about end game. We're talking about Act 1, level 1 through 25, which is the very beginning of the game. And I want every class to feel like they're doing some really solid work in that. At least that's my opinion. And I think Necromancer might be pushing that a little bit higher in terms of ease of play. But I honestly think that every class should kind of feel that way, right? And then it gets a little bit harder when we don't have the legendary items or the proper build, and that's fine. But we're not even close to that point yet. We haven't even gotten to the Paragon system, and we haven't increased our difficulties yet, and we also haven't even accessed endgame, right, which is far, far different. So for full balance discussions, I feel like it's a little bit fruitless because we're not into the later game. But in terms of ease of leveling and the process at which you feel like you're contributing, I do think that every class should feel like they're contributing a lot. And I do think that Necromancer kind of blows a lot of the classes out of the water if you don't know what you're doing. That is the caveat, right? Again, from a casual player's perspective, if you know what you're doing, I think all classes can be very, very good, especially, Barbarian. But that's the understanding, is that you know what you're doing, which isn't always the case. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, guys. If you've been playing the Necro yourself, or maybe you've been playing some of these other classes, let me know what you think. Again, if you compare the two newer classes from this weekend, Druid to Necromancer, I mean, Druid is like hot garbage in the early game compared to Necromancer. So that's what I'll say. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.